when I was listening to you, the main question I had is that not everybody likes paradigm shifts, right? This is not, usually people don't like change. So how do you overcome this anxiety, and people actually changing from the old thinking to the new thinking? What would be the biggest mistake that people can make?
Well, here's the thing, and I watch this very closely. One of the reasons I was giving you the background on what happened in the media, I was in the media business. I watched, in the early Wired days, we talked about the destruction of what's eventually going to happen to newspapers. And the newspapers had 20% margins at that time, and they were saying, you got to be kidding, this internet's going to basically undermine newspapers? Crazy. And now, in fact, the entire kind of these newspapers are literally, in the United States, are going out of business on a week. Every week there's a new business, a new one goes under. Same thing with politics. I was involved deeply in Democratic politics. People in Hillary Clinton and all the kind of traditional politicians, they looked at us and said, you got to be kidding. You're using, YouTube videos and MySpace and Facebook and, text messages to win in this thing. And in fact, the only person, the real outsider who had no chance traditionally of winning was Barack Obama. And he said, oh my God, okay, I'll try that. And clearly it won in the end, and now everybody's kind of adopting the same thing. As crazy as it sounds right now, this is the same thing that's going to happen in this paradigm shifts. The companies that stay kind of very elite-oriented, and I'm going to just figure it out from the center, I'm going to be the kind of executive committee or even the top managers, we know better than everybody. Not only are you going to lose the best people who are not going to want to play in that game, they're going to want to play in a game that's an engaged company, that I have some input into, that they respect me, they listen to me. But also, they want to be a part of a winning company that's going to win. They don't want to be a part of the Hillary Clinton campaign that's going to crash, or let alone stick with a newspaper business when Facebook's booming. So it's essentially a kind of a shift of partly out of fear, partly out of, you have to say, you know what? This is a shift that is happening whether you like it or not. You could say, well, I'll wait for it to mature a little bit more. I'll wait till maybe it's obvious that everybody's got to scramble for this thing. But that's what's happening to the person running the, Los Angeles Times right now, is desperately trying to figure out how to catch up. I think where you guys are extremely well positioned is if you take a little, not so much fear-based, but a little bit more foresight-based, and see these patterns over and over and over again. When technology gets applied, it allows engagement. People like engagement, whether they're watching media or whether they're working for a company. There's everybody in your company, they don't want to just passively listen to what's the idea, what do I do, and then go do their job. They want to actually engage what's the idea, give their idea, even just to think they're being heard, but particularly to actually, if they got their ideas heard and then engaged upon and actually worked upon, they're energized, they're connected, they're committed. They're not going to get wooed to another company. They're not going to drift off and say, this is not for me. And so it's the same kind of thing. It's just a kind of a pattern that we've seen over and over and over again. And there is no evidence, zero evidence, that this trend is reversing. If anything, it's only reinforcing itself over and over again. And so I would just say you want to basically, partly out of fear, and say, you know what, we got to keep with it, but more out of kind of vision. And I think the neat thing about your company, SocIT, which I've actually been really impressed with over the years, is you actually are innovative, and you actually are entrepreneurial, and you do take risks. And I think that's been one of the hallmarks of your company. It's one of the things I've been really the most excited about. And so when Mikhail says, not only just come and talk, but let's bring a crew. We got 6 people here, video crew. Let's try to actually do this. Let's capture what's going on here. Let's get it into Team Park. And just the fact that you have Team Park, most companies your size, and kind of doing your business, they're not genuinely trying to collaborate on strategy right now. They just aren't. This gives you a strategic advantage. It gives you a leg up. And in a tech business, which you're really selling as a tech business, anybody who's seen as on the front end or familiar with the next big thing, that's street cred in tech. That's where people want to go. And so one of the things I kind of was just alluding to, the Google thing and this Asana, which nobody knows. Asana just got $9 million in venture capital literally just 2 months ago. There is a series of companies in this space now because everybody's starting to think, this is the next big way it's going to break out. And the reason it is, I'll tell you one last thing about this because it's kind of abstract and hard to deal with. Up till now, online collaboration has been very crude, very difficult, very clunky, and very disconnected. You kind of can do one thing or another thing. What's starting to happen is it's getting much more integrated, much more smooth, much better user interfaces, and much more sophisticated, so you can get much more nuanced interaction online that's much more similar to the nuanced kind of interaction that you get in face-to-face. So just think, there's a next generation. It's just starting. You're part of the forefront. The more you do it now, the more you're going to save in the end.
Okay. Well, are there any questions at this moment from the audience? Just one there in the middle. Somebody is running towards you.
What do you think of the idea then of extending Team Park to our clients and to outside talent? Do you think that's a risk of exposing our IP and intimacy, or would that be something you'd recommend?
Good question, right?
I would say that is the next where it's going. I would say it's risky for a corporation right now to actually get that far out right now. Because if I hear you right, here's what I would say. Is you're still talking about, you want to be talking about serious strategy. You really want people to openly talk about your vulnerabilities as well as your, your strengths. And to do that, you need to have a safe environment that you really feel this is a conversation that's, bounded by your company. And I think that's totally right. And I think ultimately that's the way to get everyone over the hump and feel confident about using this thing. That said, what you're saying is the ultimate next step for all of this. And what's really interesting is that some really established companies are doing, like PG&E, for example. PG&E, essentially, its R&D is now done more. They have an R&D department, but they essentially are now exposing all their R&D ideas and engaging a community of outside developers and even their clients to actually help them figure out the next products that they're going to be lining up there. And they're finding it's fantastic. It's accelerated the amount of products that they've now come up with. It's engaging this huge community of people that wants to actually work with them now. And it's been a huge hit for those guys. There was some vulnerability of exposing that kind of long-term thinking, but in fact, it really worked very powerfully. Google's doing the same thing. Google, in fact, with this Google Wave situation, they're essentially allowing a community of developers, and actually my company is one of them, complete access to this thing. They're saying, here it is, rough, here's our plans, here's what we're trying to do, give us feedback, figure it out. And it's just amazing how basically people will respond to that. And so they're finding it very successful to engage potential customers and also potential competitors even, to give them a kind of little insight. Riskier, but clearly where the trend is going. And I would say after a time, you might consider that as well. I think in your business, getting at least your customers engaged in this, maybe not totally exposed to the public and your competitors, but the earlier you get your customers involved, the better, because they'll give you better than anybody. But at this stage, at least get the 20,000 people on the front line who are talking to those customers actively involved in this process, and that's what you're doing. And I think it's a totally great first step.
Okay. Well, I think there must be more questions, but Pete will be here the rest of the day. So what I would suggest for timing is that we thank Pete now with another big applause. Thank you very much, Peter.